Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Managing the Millennial Market by Seth from PPAI. Before we get started, I'll go over a few things so you know how to participate in today's event. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to Seth by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may send your questions in at any time and we'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end. To give a brief introduction on today's presenter, Seth is the Diversity Development Manager for PPAI. As an advocate for the industry's marketplace success, he develops new ways for business to meet the growing demand of a diverse workforce and a changing consumer market. Seth holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Management, a Master's in Public Administration, and a Master's in Law. Seth is also a lecturer and tutor for Texas Christian University and has worked with the promotional products industry for 5 years. I'll now hand you over to Seth.
All right, thanks, Kate. I appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for being here today and taking time to listen to me and come and address this topic. What you'll hear me talk about a lot today is that this particular topic is global. And though PPAI has taken it upon themselves to really step out and to say, let's address this, we are not addressing this exclusively for the industry within the U.S. We are addressing this on a global scale. And whenever I've connected with Kate and with APA in the past, I've talked about how we've taken this message to several other markets, including recently in the United Kingdom. So this is certainly a global conversation, and the idea of millennials and generational diversity challenging and changing the way we do business is certainly nothing that's new, but it's something we're all talking about. So I really hope that this resonates well with you, because it's certainly a topic that is not exclusive to any one group of people in any nation. We're all facing this at the same time. So a lot of this information that I'm going to put out to you today is based on that notion, based on that idea that this is very global, and a lot of these figures that you'll see that I talk about are based on the global understanding that the millennial generation, and we'll get into what that is and what that looks like, but that the millennial generation is the next generation that's coming of age now, has entered our marketplace, has entered the place of a career, has started to access our market specifically, and will continue to do so in the coming years. So that's kind of gives you a perspective of where I'm coming from with that. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. So like Kate said, I've been with PPAI and in the industry for about 5 years now, and I started out as PPAI's government relations manager, so I dealt with their government relations specific information based in the U.S. And then based on a couple of conversations, many conversations actually, of need talking with people in the industry, I realized that one of our next biggest challenges that we needed to face was the idea of generational diversity, the idea that as a global marketplace, our industry specifically skews towards an older demographic, and that older demographic is nearing a point of retirement, and inevitably, just like many industries are facing, if not every industry in some aspects, is facing this mass exodus of people that are about to go out, and then we're needing to fill this space because there's been this sort of gap left. And so I wanted to address those challenges, and I looked at that with the idea that, okay, well, we need to teach our industry how to basically recruit and retain millennials. Whenever I got into that, I really realized not only is that part of the consideration, but another part of the consideration is that we need to teach the industry what this new consumer market looks like and how these millennials are going to market, so that even if you're not in a capacity to hire or you don't have staff that work with you, that you are still able to meet the demands of this changing marketplace. And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn and to grow and to figure out what we can do next. So to give you an idea of where this came from, a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago now, PPAI's board of directors got together and, as they do every 3 to 5 years, and come up with a new strategic focus. Now, this strategic focus is for the industry as a whole. It's not necessarily for our membership, and it's not necessarily for members in the United States. We're looking at our bigger market and saying, what's the strategic focus that we as an association need to look at in the coming years, because these are going to be the things, if we don't tackle them, they will become too big of a challenge for people to handle. And the reason why we as an association exist is to ensure that your businesses are able to succeed, that we take the guesswork out of it so that you can do business as usual. So 3 of the things that they came up with were the biggest challenges, I don't want to say threats, but biggest challenges to our industry in the coming years. The first was globalization, which obviously, hey, we're tackling that challenge here today, and the fact that PPAI has partnered globally with these great groups like APA, it helps us to reach our global marketplace, and our world has become smaller, and we are interconnected to each other like never before, and will continue to be ever interconnected to each other. So globalization is obviously something we need to pay attention to. The second is technology. Without question, technology is hugely impacting the way that we do business. Many of you have been in the industry for many years, can attest to the fact that whenever email came of age and online marketing came of age, that was a significant turning point for our industry. And I think that the industry tapped into those things well. But you look at technology now, and we're going to talk a lot about technology today. We'll talk a lot about social media. Things like that are changing the way that we do business. They're changing our access to a marketplace. But I don't want that to scare you. I'm going to point out some things that it really should excite you. And finally, demographic, which globalization, technology kind of funnel into demographic, because demographic is a global challenge. It's something that we're seeing. Different countries have a different group of young people that are coming of age at a certain point in history. I'll give you an example. I've done some research recently on Vietnam. Vietnam is actually the first country to have a vast majority of their workforce be this millennial group, and then other countries are starting to come online after that. So we're dealing with demographic shifts all over the place. Some industries are tackling the challenge a little bit quicker than others. We are certainly not behind the mark, but we are starting to miss that. We are getting to a point where we need to, as a community, as a global community, have this conversation to ensure that we tackle this challenge effectively. So this whole idea, this whole generational diversity, demographic, all of this came about after our board of directors looked at these 3 challenges. And I presented a plan to the board of directors and said, hey, let's actually figure out a way specifically on the demographic piece, because I see that as a millennial myself, and looking around our industry and not having a ton of peers that are interconnected to me, I look at it as a significant challenge. Let's really tackle this. And then early last year, the board of directors gave me sort of the keys to do so. So that's what I'm presenting to you today. So everything that you see here today is research that either I've developed with PPAI's help, or is scholarly research that's come from some outside institution throughout the world somewhere. So I hope this helps you understand the perspective of where we are coming from, where PPAI is coming from, and where I want the direction that I'd like to take this in. So let's talk about this group. So millennials, Generation Y, young professionals, you can put any kind of note on it. At the end of the day, here's who we're talking about. There's no specific date. There's no exact date for any generation. We didn't actually start identifying generations until after the turn of the 20th century. And ever since then, we've never actually put a specific mark on here's each group. Baby boomers don't have an exact start date and an exact end date. Generation Y, millennials, it's the same sort of thing. But let's say this. Let's say for our argument's sake today, let's assume that Generation Y, the millennials, are born between the years of 1981 and 2000. Again, that's just for our argument's sake today. That's everything that you're going to see today that's research-based is based on the idea that Generation Y, or the Millennials, are born between 1981 and 2000. Now, anything you read, anything you research is going to say some different number. I've seen all kinds of different numbers, all within that same time period, but still it can be a little bit skewed either way. Whenever I actually wanted to start looking at this and understand who is this target group, I made that group pretty big. I expanded it. 1981 to 2000, I'll think about the things that happened in that time. A lot of stuff went on globally during that time, but I did that for a reason. I wanted to convey that this generation, starting the ones that were starting to be born in early 1980s, really changed the way that, I mean, think about how kids were raised after that time period, and technology started to slowly creep in and then became ever present as we moved towards the end of the 1990s. So let's base it on that assumption. So that's who we're talking about today, that millennial group. Of that group, there are about 65% of that group that are present in the global workforce. So again, it could be that skews a little bit because there are some countries that have a little bit more millennials in their workforce, some that have a little bit less. For example, Australia is similar, very similar to the United States. We've got about 25% of that group is in a capacity to that they're actually out there in sort of a career role. So if you broaden that a little bit, you actually look at the group that is past the university level or has gotten out there and started to begun their working careers. We're looking at 60 to 65% of that group. One of the biggest things that I want to say about that group is that of that entire group, one of the things that stands out most, and that stands out most to me, is that the things that we research, the things that we talk about, the things that we're out there surveying millennials on, is that they want an understanding about work-life balance. I have to mention that early because that comes across on everything that we find out, every research, everything that we do. It comes across that that's one of those things. Now, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding between certain groups in our industry, because that work-life balance has, in some ways, it works really well in our industry because our industry doesn't necessarily have to be 24/7. However, at the same time, at least in the United States, we've gotten to a place where we want people to be available all the time. To me, especially as we're talking about this idea of managing a millennial market, one of the biggest frustrations that people have is the disconnect between that idea of work-life balance. So that if you are ringing somebody up and they've already gone home for the day, or if they work from home, they've already shut that part of their day off and they're not answering the phone, it's not because they don't want to talk to you. It's not because they don't want to connect. It's certainly not because they don't want to do business with you. It's because they're pushing for more of a work-life balance than it's previously been understood. We're continuing to see this evolve, but I can't stress enough how important that is, because just that understanding helps so much. I talk to so many people in the industry that say, oh, I can't connect with this person because they want to stick to a strict work schedule and strict hours. And I say, look, that's part of what they're going to push for. There is a balance. We are not an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday industry. However, we're certainly not necessarily needing to be a 24-hour industry, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week industry, and we'll go through that just because of the access to technology and things like that. Now, I will say this, and what kind of stood out to me and surprised me whenever I was in the United Kingdom last summer and doing some research and talking to industry leaders out there, they basically laid it out as as an industry there, have tried to create that sort of avenue of work-life balance, which I cite a lot whenever I talk or I do some writing about this, because that's a good way to look at it, to say, as an industry as a whole, you have to make this work. In the U.S., we're not there. We're not at a place where we can say, okay, let's let's make sure that nobody works on Sundays. Well, that's just not going to happen because things are constantly evolving, things are constantly moving. But I put that out there early just to be able to say that that's one of those instant frustrations we can kind of knock down. If that person's not calling you back because they're done with their day, it doesn't mean that they're not wanting to connect. You just got to give them the opportunity to connect back with you at a later point. So perceptions. Let's talk about perceptions. Perceptions to me are the most harmful thing that's out there, not just about the millennial generation, but about all generations. People can misperceive any generation. I can certainly misperceive the baby boomer generation just based on whatever kind of belief, whatever kind of perception that I have. I can not see the baby boomers for who they actually are, for who I actually need them to be seen as. So let's look at perception. So here's some information that was a survey that was done a couple of years back, and I want to draw your attention. Let's look at the right side first. Let's look at Generation X and baby boomers. So basically the two major groups that came before the millennials. So this was a survey that reached out to this group, these two segments, these Generation X and baby boomers, and said, what do you think of millennials? And basically just very blatantly, what do you think of millennials? And as you can see from this graph, the number one item that stands out is the tech savvy piece. Well, 86% say tech savvy. I completely understand where that's coming from. I get why people think that, Gen Xers and boomers think that millennials are extremely tech savvy because they have this level of constant connectivity. If everybody's on social media, they've got to be tech savvy. And I do not see that as harmful or anything. I will say this, though. Whenever I've even organically asked people, what do you think about millennials or what is your idea, the first thing they go to is a tech savvy place. Well, they're always on their phones. They must be tech savvy. So let's leave that there for right now. So that one's not bad. I'm not going to point that out as a bad one to say that's not necessarily a bad perception, but it's just sort of a misperceived idea. So let's look at the bottom ones. Let's take a look at the bottom ones. So people savvy. So Gen Xers and baby boomers said that millennials are not necessarily people savvy. Only 14% would say that they are people savvy at all. And then as we move down, we see, well, only 1% is loyal to their employers, so that's pretty low. So that's one of those perceptions that really stands out. And then if you look down there at the bottom, you see hardworking. They say, well, millennials are not necessarily hardworking. Again, remember, it's that misperceived idea about that work-life balance thing. So now let's look at the left-hand side. Now keep in mind, remember what the bottom three were. People savvy, they're not people savvy, they're not loyal to employers, and they're not hardworking. So let's look at the left-hand side. So this same group reached out to millennials that were in a career, not necessarily just in the workforce, but in their career, and they said, how would you describe yourself? Now remember the bottom three from the right-hand side? Look at the top three on the left-hand side. Millennials said, you know what? We're people savvy, and we're loyal to employers, and we are, above all else, hardworking. So that stands out, right? There is a obvious disconnect between how millennials are perceiving themselves and how other generations are perceiving them, and it's extremely harmful. Let's look down this list. Let's look at people savvy. People savvy is one that stands out to me because it's very easy to say that millennials are not people savvy. They're disconnected. They've got so much access to technology. There's no reason for them to be people savvy, right? They don't have to have that interpersonal communication skill because they're completely disconnected. That perception can be harmful because think about it like this. Take that idea of people savvy to the next level, of being able to interconnect to people. Think about how social media has changed things. Think about the people savviness of social media. You've got to be able to look at social media. Let's take the example of Facebook. Let's look at Facebook and say that Facebook is a tool to be people savvy. Facebook is a resource. Think about what people put on Facebook. They put everything. For example, myself, my Facebook page, I've got my one Facebook page that has everything that's work related, everything that's personal related. I put everything on there because that's me. If you and I were to have a conversation in a pub, that's what, I'd talk about my wife, I talk about my family, I talk about my career, I talk about the industry. All of those things that I would share with you anyway, it's on Facebook. So think about me connecting with somebody else and trying to find information about them. I promise you I do this on a weekly basis. Whenever I have a conversation, a phone call with somebody, even if it's somebody I've talked to a week ago, or maybe it's somebody I haven't spoken to in 6 months, I will look on social media, because if I've done business with them, the odds are I am connected with them at some channel of social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm connected with them somewhere. And I'll look on there so that whenever I pick up the phone, it's not kind of that awkward, like, okay, what do we talk about now? That I don't want them to perceive me as that millennial that doesn't have that people savvy sense, so that I can then know that I did my homework. So I can pick up the phone and say, hey, tell me about your vacation. I saw that looked great, because they're putting that stuff out there. So I'm tapping into that. To me, and I could be wrong on this, but to me, that's very people savvy. That's people savvy 101. That is the people savvy that I was taught in college sales and marketing classes. It's that ability to connect to someone on that next level so that you're showing an interest and involvement in them. Millennials do this better than anyone else. They understand that everyone is interconnected. You can find information on anyone in any company today. So that people savvy perception, remember, it's not that the boomers and Gen Xers were totally wrong in this. It's just that the people savvy perception is different. So let's look down the list. Let's actually look at the bottom. So only 11% of Gen Xers and boomers said that millennials were hardworking. Whereas millennials themselves say, you know what, we're really hardworking. The number one thing we are is hardworking. But remember that work-life balance thing. There's this perception out there that if I'm at my office and I go to the office every day, if I go to my office and I'm work from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon and then go home, and somebody else that is in my department works from 8 in the morning till 6 p.m., and then goes home, they see me leave 2 hours before them and think, well, he's just, I don't know what he's doing. He's not working hard. But who's to say I'm not working hard? Who's to say that in that shorter time period, I actually accomplished, if not the same, maybe more than the person who stayed 2 extra hours? Statistically, people that work less during the day actually accomplish more because they have less time to put things off. Millennials are tapping into this in every way possible because, again, they want that work-life balance. They don't want their entire world to be their job. This is difficult for people to understand because these are the people you're trying to connect with, to sell to market to. And if they don't have that constant availability, it's kind of like, oh, what do I do? How do I connect with them? But then I'm going to point out another piece of this. Think about social media. Think about the constant connectivity. I may be done with my day at 4 o'clock and not check email until the next morning, but I'm on Facebook. I go home and sit in front of the TV, and I'll get on Facebook at some point that night. So if people truly need to connect to me, they utilize that resource. They utilize that outlet. So finally, I want to take a look at tech savvy, just because it stands out to me. And like I said, whenever I ask people this, they talk about, oh, they're tech savvy. Well, look at what millennials said. They said, yeah, we're really not tech savvy. And in fact, if somebody were to ask me in the same survey, I'd put tech savvy at the very bottom. I absolutely am tech familiar, but tech savvy I am not. I always joke with people. I say, if I've got a problem with technology, I'm going to call my dad, my baby boomer dad, because he understands how the technology works. I understand how to turn it on, and I understand how to get to certain aspects of my phone, my computer, my tablet, but I have no idea how it works. And so it's just funny to look at that and think that the assumption is there. Remember, the perception is there that, oh, they're always on technology, they're tech savvy. But that one's one of those kind of comical ways to look at it, to say, not necessarily are they as tech savvy as the perception assumes. All right. So let's talk about buyers, people that are actually buying from our industry, all industries, young professionals, millennials who are buyers. So here's a quote: Gen Y won't buy from you. So that was an Associated Press article title that came out last year. Gen Y, which is the millennials, won't buy from you. I added the yet. Gen Y is a very finicky group to sell to. The main people that they want to do business with, the main people they want to buy from are their peers. Is that difficult for our industry? Absolutely, because there are not a lot of their peers in our industry. But why do they only want to buy from their peers? This group, I cannot stress this enough, doesn't want to be sold to. I think we all can attest at some point we don't want to be sold to. I don't want to be sold to. I want to be sold absolutely nothing. But think about it like this. We've got to move ourselves away from being a promotional products people, if you consider yourself a promotional product salesperson, for example. In order to do business with this new buying group, you've got to take yourself to another level. You've got to elevate yourself to another level, which you already are. I don't consider anyone in our industry just a promotional product salespeople. You are marketing professionals. You're advertising professionals. Your media just happens to be physical, tangible. It happens to be a product. I had a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody who is a supplier in the States, and he said, I would love to say that I don't want to tell people that I sell promotional products because I feel like it sort of degrades the industry. Because he said, we're so much more. We're so much more than product. We are a resource. We are a relationship point. We are so much more than just the products that we are allowing people to consume. But he said, I just don't know how to get past promotional products. And I said, well, you've just got to glam it up a little bit. Think about, we are a marketing and advertising industry. We're not a product industry. We help people succeed in their brands. We help people convey a message. We're not helping people connect with a product. The product is very secondary. So we've got to look at this as we are a tangible advertising industry. Tangible because it's physical, we can touch it, but we're still an advertising industry. Or we are a physical marketing industry. We are all marketing professionals. Everyone that works in this industry is a marketing professional who has expertise at a marketing level, but you just happen to have an additional expertise that's in a physical, tangible marketing world. So Gen Y, millennials won't buy from you yet, simply means they don't want to be sold to. If they're going to be sold to, it's because they understand what they're buying. I know that if I'm going to go buy a new car, I will somewhat be sold to because that's just the understanding that I have of that particular situation. I know that I'm going to go in there and say, I want car X, and they're going to say, no, what about car Y or Z? This one's got, such and such, whatever. In that situation, yes, I know I'm going to be sold to. If people are coming to you, they're coming to you because they're buying product. If you're going to them, they understand that you are selling product. You don't need to sugarcoat it. You just need to be able to say, here's what else I'm providing. Here are the marketing and advertising resources that I want you to put your investment dollars into to support me supporting you. And is there a vehicle in a physical, tangible product? Absolutely. So here's a cool quote. If people believe they share value with a company, they'll stay loyal to the brand. Value comes with not being sold to. If you can figure out a way to sell to them without selling to them, and I know that sounds strange, sell to them without selling to them, but if you can find a way to do that, if you can find a way to tap into this young new market without actually having to put on that salesperson hat and create value, show that you have value in what you do, in the way that you do business. The reason why I love this industry and I love representing this industry is because I see value out there. From the one-person operation to the 5,000-person operation, there is so much value in what we all have and what we all share. If I can buy into that, if me as a consumer, as a millennial consumer can buy into that, I am going to stay loyal. Because I know that am I buying product from you? Yeah, but that's the transaction piece. I'm buying so much more. I'm buying a resource. and a connectivity and an opportunity for you to help my brand and my business succeed. So this new consumer group, obviously there's this new consumer group out there. They, like we talked about earlier, they're going to ever expand. They're going to continue to come into our marketplace. Half of that group, remember how much of that group is already out there. Half of that group as of today is in a capacity to make business decisions. That means that if you're looking at your book of business and half of them are, if half of them are not, it's not executed by a millennial or somebody in this generation, then you've got to strive to get to that point. Because if half of that group is in a capacity to make business buying decisions and business decisions, then half of your book of business should be this particular group of people. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the companies you're doing business with are exclusively millennial companies. It just means that the companies you're doing business with probably have those young professionals that you will start to do business with inevitably at some point in the future. So 70% of this group feels that 24/7 customer support is critical. But wait, let's back up. Remember earlier I said this group does not want 24/7. They don't want this industry to be 24. They don't want to buy from somebody who wants to sell 24/7. But wait, but now we're looking at this and they're saying 70%, a vast majority of this group wants 24/7 customer support, and they say it's critical. But think about what customer support is. It's not customer service. It's not me picking up the phone at PPAI and saying, hey, this is Seth, PPAI, how can I help you? It's you going to certain places to find information. When this webinar is over, if you want to find more information, you go to our website, or you go to my Facebook page, or you go to all these different resources. That's customer support. I'm providing access points for you to constantly have customer support connectivity because you as industry members are my customers. So I'm giving you those access points. This group feels that those access points have to be there. I tell people all the time, if you are doing business in our industry and you don't have some sort of a digital footprint, which means a website, a Facebook page, a Twitter handle, whatever it may be that you have your information about your company, even if you are a one-person operation, if you don't have that digital footprint, I don't know what the very near future looks like. If I can't even tell you what today looks like because everybody's got that. The access points are there. This consumer group, this new consumer group is expecting that. They want that connectivity. They want that constant connectivity. And the cool thing is it's pretty easy to give that to them. So 76% say mobile-friendly sites are important. That number I have to put on here because that number is steadily increasing. If you have a website and you don't know if it's mobile friendly, it very well may be. Get on your phone and check that out and see if it is. If it's not, figure out a way to convert it to that because it's a very familiar thing today. And that's the problem is familiarity. Is people search on their phones and on their tablets and they want to ensure that not only are you providing those access points for constant connectivity, but that those access points look familiar to them. So how are purchase decisions driven? This is outside everything, all purchase decisions. How are they driven from this particular millennial group? Number one, look at the biggest chunk of that pie. Number one, personal referral. Remember, this is the same group that Gen Xers and Boomers perceived as being disconnected and not being people savvy, but yet here we're saying that a vast chunk, a very large chunk, 38% of this group, their purchase decisions are driven by personal referrals. But again, I'm going to go back to that digital footprint thing, that online access, because personal referral really has to do, it's different than the old school method of actually calling someone up and saying, hey, I'm in such and such city, where's a good place to eat? Nowadays, if I put that information, think about this. If I put that information online, if I'm out of town and I put, hey, I'm in this such and such city. If I just put it on my Facebook page, where's a good place to eat? Think of how many people will see that and how many people will connect to that message. Because for one, it's super easy. If I know that particular city or I've been there, I will easily put down a name. I'll type that in because it's super quick and easy. It's not me calling up one person after the other. I have an access to all of these people. That's personal referral. We see that so much in our industry too. So much has been driven by online referral, which is great because that's how purchase decisions of this group are driven. So that's, again, another place to look for to have that online footprint. Look at the second one. Look at 20% online searches. I'll put this out there. Let me just put this out there for you. Have you searched yourself online? Have you used a search engine to search, one, for yourself, which it was a joke. Many years ago, it was a joke of, oh, have you Googled yourself? But really, no joke, do that today. If you get the opportunity, Google yourself. Put your name into a search engine. Put your company's name. See what comes up. Put promotional products and put your area, your territory, and just see what comes up, just so that you better understand what's out there and what people are seeing. Understand your digital footprint. So as we move on down the list, we see things that are somewhat familiar. Advertisements, online review, storefront, sure, is there, but certainly not as important as it once was. But the big thing to look at is that personal referral and online search. That's part of that digital footprint. Remember, it's not that the millennials created these digital footprints. Now they want to access that. They've just been there. Everything that we do is online driven. We are able to find businesses we want to work with, to find things we want to connect to online. It should be that way for our industry as well. There are certainly arguments against putting our industry out there and putting it online, but the problem is the buyers are not going to listen to those arguments. They're going to spend that advertising dollar elsewhere if we're not careful. Do business where they do business. So millennials, do business where they do business. Not even millennials, not even focused on millennials. This adage, this sort of sales adage, do business where they do business, was very literal at one point in history, not too long ago. So it was do business where they do business. If you were going to do business with a church, you would actually physically go to that church to do business with them, to show them that, hey, I'm here in person. I really care about what you've got going on. I want to help spread your message. I want to help share your brand through this tangible advertising. But think about where this Generation Y millennials do business. Like 80-something% online. Everything is online driven. That's what we're talking about, right? So guess what? Do business where they do business means all I'm asking you to do is get online, because that's their ease of access. That's their communication point. Sure, you can certainly go knock on their doors. You can do that. You absolutely can do that. But remember, they're weary of that. But if you're able to find a way to do business where they do business through social media, online channels where they already are, you've won. You're knocking on their door without actually physically having to go to knock on their door. So look at this. 90% of millennials in a business-to-business buying or selling capacity rely on Facebook. So that's, we'll just lay that one out there. We'll say Facebook. 90% of millennials who do that business-to-business buying or selling, the people that you are going to do business with, rely on Facebook for research. That means that they want to go to your Facebook page. And I promise you, I do this all the time. Whenever I'm connected to a new company or I do business with somebody new, I go and look them up on Facebook. I don't Google them. I don't go to their website. I go to Facebook first. Why? Because that is the most familiar space to me. That's the most familiar space to my group of people. I want to know, because part of it is your website, you can glam up your website all day long. Facebook is very real. It's very raw. I want to go to if I am in a capacity to buy tangible physical advertising from you, and I want to know about your company, I will go to your Facebook page. Now I can see one of two things. I can either go to the Facebook page and I can see a whole page full of products and everything, your profile pictures of product, and I just see product. But remember what I said before, we get it. We're in the promotional products business. If I'm coming to you doing that level of research, I know that I want to buy product from you. So I want to know what else there is. Facebook is an opportunity, and all social media really is an opportunity for you to be very real, for you to be very organic about what you say. put information about, connecting with, if you've got a Facebook page or a social media account like I do mine, where everything is interconnected, put those things out there. If you've got a business account, which is totally fine to do, if your company has a business account, put pictures of the people in your organization, or parties that you had, or conferences that you attended, or whatever it may be, so that you are showing that you value what you do, you value the people you work with, you value your connectivity, and that you are selling yourself as more than just product. So 53% of that group relies on Twitter for customer interaction. That number is steadily decreasing, but I like to put it on there because Twitter is still very relevant. LinkedIn is up there. 47% of millennial marketers connect on LinkedIn. And look at this last one. 61%. Now, this is U.S. marketers specifically, but 61% use social media for lead generation, meaning they're actually getting on there to figure out where to spend these advertising dollars. So I always tell people, don't you want to be one of those that they can search out? I want to put this up here real quick just to talk about our industry social media use. We as a whole, as an industry, do social media pretty well. We, are connected on social media several times a day, which is great. I think, at one time, even 5 years ago, this would be a very negative thing if people said, oh yeah, I'm at my office and I connect on social media several times a day. I know that there are many offices in the States in our industry that discontinued the use of social media in the workplace, and now it's almost encouraged. And so this is encouraging to me, because I look at it and say, okay, several times a day people are utilizing social media, which is great. But the one that stands out to me is, you look at that 7%. 7% of people in our industry say they've never used social media. So that's 7% of people who will never do business where they do business, and they being the millennials. So just kind of audit yourself. Think about how much you use social media. It doesn't have to be an addiction. It doesn't have to be a constant thing, but putting yourself out there, creating that online access point, is a really good idea. So now that we've talked about technology and social media, let's look at this. Technology and social media has made the next generation antisocial. So here's a quote that I found, and I've heard this many times in some form or fashion. So technology and social media has made the next generation antisocial, because we're constantly connected, that we've become so constantly connected that we're disconnected. And I don't totally disagree with that. I put that out there to say that, yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of the place that we are. But remember, millennials didn't create that. We just sort of inherited these things. Now it's up to the rest of us to figure out a way to properly tap into it. But I put this up here to have a little bit of fun. Let's look at this next image. Look at this. So here is, you want to talk about disconnected. Look at this group of people. Look how disconnected they all are. They've all got their heads in the newspapers, and they're constantly disconnected. So there was an article that came out in the 1950s in the U.S. that said that newspapers were making people antisocial in social settings because of this same thing. It's the same thing if you walk through an airport today and everybody's got their head in their phone or their tablet or their computer, and people are disconnected. It's easy to say, like, oh, gosh, this is where society is. No, society has been here. You think about this picture and kind of let that stick with you, to say, we've constantly have distractions that make us antisocial. It's not necessarily technology and social media. So I put that out there to have a little bit of fun, just to say that, are we there? Are we at that point where we are at a certain new level of disconnect? Yeah, I guess so. But it's just that the access of the disconnection, or what we're using to be disconnected, is just different than it once was. So here's some takeaways I want people to walk away with today. So number one, adopt an omni-channel approach. That's that online digital footprint. Do you have that? If you do have that, do you have an omni-channel connectivity? Meaning, does your Facebook page easily connect to your website? Because remember, if I'm on there and I'm researching you on Facebook and I want to know your value, I want to know what stands out about you and your business, after I feel really good about that, I want to go someplace where I can actually do business with you. So I want to easily get over to that website. And then on the website, are there those easy connectivities, those easy channel approaches to get to your other social media, to get to anything else that you want to connect with? I always tell people, do you want to think you're right, or do you want to sell? there was I had a conversation with somebody last year that that she was very frustrated. She was starting to do business with this millennial client, and she would call this person. She would, do the very old school sort of cold calling and try to sell her product and leave voicemails. And the millennial, wouldn't call her back, but she would get an email back from her like, "Hey, send me, ideas about product," or whatever, whatever it may be, because she wanted that was her familiar place. She didn't answer the phone because she was more familiar doing business through email. So I said, "Okay, so tell me more about that." She said, "Well, we constantly went back and forth through email. I sent her some product ideas. She sent me some things along, and then I would try to call her and wrap everything up, and she wouldn't call me back, and she would send me an email." And I said, "Oh man, I understand how frustrating that is." So I said, "So you've still not done business with this client?" She said, "Oh no, I've done a ton of business with her, but I've only talked to her maybe once or twice." And so I kind of got to that point where I thought, okay, so I'm misunderstanding the problem. Is it frustrating? You better believe it's frustrating that people only want to do business through these digital channels and email and text messaging. Is it frustrating? Totally frustrating. Absolutely. But does it work? Yep, it does. At the end of the day, it works. So I tell people very blatantly, do you want to think you're right, or do you want to sell? Because for that lady doing business with that one millennial client that wouldn't call her back, that she was still able to do business with, and a substantial amount of business with, that next millennial would probably be the one that wouldn't leave her alone on the phone. So again, do you want to think you're right, or do you just want to sell? What's your story? Be authentic and transparent. Everybody's got a story. Tell it. Put it out there. As you're working on those digital platforms and you're working on that digital footprint, tell your story. I think that's what's super cool about our industry. I always tell people this industry is like a bunch of snowflakes where no two are the same. Put that out there. Put your value statements out there. I want to see that. People that do business with you want to see that. Keep up industry knowledge, know your product, understand your product, because this group is going to ask about it. They're going to inquire more and more about product. 20 years ago, where somebody might not have inquired about a pen, today this group is going to inquire about the pen. It doesn't necessarily have to be a green product. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sustainable product or whatever, but be able to have those conversations and really, really know the products that you're putting in front of them. Connect with other people, connect with those channels and the manufacturing sources and where you're getting that product from, and have those conversations. And again, don't create presumptions. Don't assume. Don't assume to know millennials. I always tell people, if you're doing business with a millennial and you've got sort of a bad taste in your mouth about somebody that you've done business with in the past that was a millennial, don't put us all into that boat. There are bad millennials out there, but you know what? There are bad baby boomers. There are bad Gen Xers. I always tell people I can name a good handful of baby boomers who I've just had horrible situations with, but I don't instantly write off baby boomers and say, well, I can't do business with them because of those 5 people, those handful of people. So don't be so quick to write off millennials, and don't be so quick to assume to know them without moving on to sort of that next one. Are you going to find those sort of thorns among the rose bushes? Absolutely, but every generation's got them. So I encourage people, connect with me, stay connected with me. I'm in the benefit of I'm in a role to benefit our industry as a whole globally. So connect with me. As you notice on here, I put my Facebook information. That's my place. That's my place of doing business. Come do business where I do business, right? So connect with me through there. Certainly take down my email address, and I've got all this research, everything you saw in this presentation. I know that Kate's got it available for you, but you can find all that research and all that information through that website right there. And then also turn your attention to the bottom there. If you're a PPAI member or not, you have access to this. There's our PPB, which is our monthly magazine. The generational selling article that I did came out a couple of months ago, but if you go to the PPAI website and in the search bar you type in generational selling, and then specifically if you want to go to the PPAI PPB website, if you just go to Google and type in PPAI PPB, and then in that search bar, whenever that page comes up, just type in generational selling. It's a really good case study as a continuation from this, so you can really see these things come to light. I use some case studies about people that are actually doing things the way I would say are doing things right within our industry. So I encourage you to look at that as a next place to go. If you're kind of like, oh, I've got this information, I don't know what to do next, check that out and use that as a good next step. So I think, Kate, I'll open it up to you to pass along any questions you've got, and I'm glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
Sounds good. Thanks, Seth, so much. That was fantastic. Some really great information and statistics there on a very hot topic. There don't seem to be any questions so far. I'll just give it another second and see if any come through. No, doesn't look like any so far. So as Seth mentioned, his details are on the screen. Feel free to contact him with any questions you might have. And tomorrow, everyone will receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of today's webinar and a link to view Seth's slides also. So on behalf of Seth and APA, thank you for joining us today and have a great afternoon, everybody.